I can only imagine how popular this game would be if if it got away from control and money and franchises, and it went to the people, because people would go crazy in this country for promotion relegation, and I think that would be in all sports. To be honest with you, I think if they did it in American football, I think if they did it in American basketball, and they did it in baseball, I would have interest. Even only those final games that meant something, I would be I would be interested in those stories, and because I understand what it means to the fans, and I understand what it means to the ownership groups and the players to move up, and that's so American. The underdog story is so American, and we go away from it in this country, and blows my, it blows my mind.
Hey guys, really quick, before you get to the video, do me one quick favor. Like the video down below if you haven't already done so. Subscribe to the channel. GOLZtv is on this mission of growing the beautiful game in North America. Whether you call it soccer, footy, football, doesn't really matter. We want to see the game grow in the States, in broader North America. Can't do it without your help, all right? So if you support that mission alone, subscribe to the channel. Plenty of stories being told by fans, content creators, everyone in between. We really appreciate your support. If we can get at least 20 plus likes on this video, I would be massively grateful. Again, just like the video down below, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy. We have Brandon Jantz, owner of Temecula FC out of Nisa. We'll talk about the league here on the episode today. On the show for us, I'm so excited that he's here. Brandon, how are you, my man?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on, Jose. I appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you again for joining. And so for today, Brandon, I really want to, and we kind of talked about it off air, but before we started the show today, I really want to focus on your story like we typically do for guests here on Box to Box. I think it's pretty, I don't want to say it's uncommon for us to have someone of your kind of stature, right? A club owner, someone who's highly vested into growing something from scratch in a part of the world where the sport just isn't a top sport or a top 2 or top 3 sport. There are definitely tons of ups and downs there. We'll talk about all of them, but I think you're going to have a ton of just interesting tidbits of entertainment, of information that our audience can really latch onto today. So I'm excited, man. Before I do, I think our audience already knows what question I'm going to ask. I ask every single guest on this show. Brandon, who are you today?
That's a very good question, and I ask myself as well every single day. But today, I think I'm a husband, I'm a father, that is trying to bring football properly to our community and really help the community, help all these kids, um, help the supporters, and I try to figure it out. It's been 10 years, and I try to figure out every day, who I am, and I just have to look inside every day and try to ask that same question. I don't exactly know, but that's as good as I can give.
Yeah, I like that, man. And look, it's probably the most honest response we've had in a long time. I think we're all trying to figure it out, right? Depending on when you ask that question, we're in these different seasons of our life. And today, like you mentioned, right, you're a man of the people, of the community, so to speak. You're trying to build something that your specific community is going to love and carry with them, even when your time with Temecula FC is kind of come and gone. So I highly respect that, man. I think there's going to be a lot of people who find a lot of solace in that response. But look, let's jump in. I don't want to waste any more time here from the viewer's perspective or the listener's perspective, depending on where you're listening today. I'm really excited to have you here. I definitely want to kind of unpack how you go from being a footy fan to wanting to run a club, because that is a massive undertaking, a massive responsibility. I think you already mentioned it before, or you alluded to it. You have the weight of your community on your shoulders as you try to build something special for the supporters of the club. So we'll talk about all of that, and we'll kind of scale to that properly. But let's start in the beginning, right? I imagine before you ever, decided that you wanted to own a club, before you ever decided to get into that game of business, you were a fan of the beautiful game. And so I want to talk about what brought you in, because from my perspective, Americans have such nuanced experiences and stories that bring them into this game that has yet to really reach critical mass in North America. So let's start in the beginning. Were you a player first? Were you a fan first? What are your earliest memories of soccer?
Yeah, for sure. Just a player. I was born in 1978, so at that time there really isn't any football, soccer in the United States at any level, especially not locally where I grew up. Here in Temecula, I mean, I think there was maybe 7,000, maybe 12,000 people living here at the time when we first were here. So just recreational soccer that a lot of people started, and I just happened to be good. And would get a lot of compliments, and everybody would want me on their team, and and I like that. My parents got divorced when I was young, and anybody that's been through a divorce, there's kind of, I wouldn't say it's always a bad thing, but you have one side, you have the other side, and you're kind of in the middle a lot. And I found that when I was on the field playing, there was none of that. It was just the ball, it was the field, it was teammates, and since I was good at it, then I've got some attention from people, and made friends very easy, and I really enjoyed it. To be honest with you, I can't explain. People ask a lot, like, why do you love soccer? And it's not something I can. I just feel it's something I feel. It's not something I can explain, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't think any one of us can really do that, right? It's a, I don't know, it's like an itch that I have to continuously keep scratching, and there's really no other way to kind of describe that from my perspective. I mean, when I say that, people sometimes people look at me like I'm talking about a drug, and in a small way, I kind of am, right? It literally is that addicting. But I kind of want to go back to something you mentioned there, growing up in the '70s, playing this game that you were good at, that allowed you to make friends pretty easily. For those audience members who grew up obviously at a later time, and you think about still how much growth soccer or football has yet to really experience or see. We have a long way to go to kind of grow it to where it is in other parts of the world. If you could kind of paint a picture for what it was like back then, right, decades ago, when it wasn't anywhere close to what it is now. I mean, when you were talking to your friends about this game, or your family, or just people who maybe were a little more adamant about, I don't know, the NFL or the NBA or any other Americanized sport, what was that like? I mean, what was the learning curve for those of us who didn't play?
Yeah. So it was lonely at times. I'll be honest with you. Even as I got into my teens and went from playing recreational soccer. I only played club soccer for the later part of my youth career. I think 14 is when I started. So only really played club soccer for a little bit, and I did what normal kids did back then, which is play almost every sport there was. A spring, a winter, a fall, and summer off, and then when I started playing club soccer, it was the first ever club team in Temecula. There were no other club teams, and
Wow.
clubs meaning, like, now there's so many clubs, there's hundreds of teams. It doesn't really mean anything, to be honest with you, in terms of the grand scheme of what football's about. But back then it was just one. That was it. And made some top friends, best friends of my life. And at that point, you start to learn, like, well, what is this? People say soccer's not a real sport. It's for girls. Even when I became a pro as a teenager, I remember having to fill out a credit application for a place to live. And the person looked at me like, "You make money playing soccer?" They had
Wow.
all the owner of the club, all this stuff like that was, and this is in the '90s now. Uh, so you can imagine the kids nowadays how blessed they are, really, because we had to get all the scores of everything off of the newspaper, or wait for 442 magazine to come out like once a month at the mall. And I grew up poor, so I couldn't afford to even buy that. So we just go and read it there at like the Barnes and Nobles, or I forget what the other ones was called in the mall, but we would just sit there and read the whole thing. And that everybody looked at us like we were crazy. And there was maybe two or three of us that would just train all the time in our community, and nobody else cared about it. Nobody else liked it. Me to go out and play American football because I was fast and I was strong, and that was popular. But I just thought it was the most boring thing in the world, standing around all the time, and I just loved the game. And there was a lot of embarrassing times. I mean, people call you gay, people call you all these bad names, like at high school, like that sports gay, this, that, and the other. I mean, that's how it was back in the '90s. And you had to, not that you had to be tough skinned, to deal with it, or anything like that. It's not nothing that bad, but everybody looked at it, and a lot of people still look at it like it's not a real sport.
Yeah.
Americans, think about baseball or American football, really, and basketball. They really look at soccer as being just some European sport or South American sport, and that it's boring and slow. There's no, goals scored, all the same old things, that are normal. Um, and I never really cared, though, to be honest with you. Is thinking about players now, because I coach in the youth as well and watch players constantly as well. And a lot of it's still here. It's more popular of a sport, and parents sign their kids up for club soccer and rec soccer, and thousands of kids play, but they're still all the same. They don't really care or love the game. Um, and you can tell usually pretty easy because they don't even want to just touch the ball and move the ball, and they don't find excitement in just kicking the ball off the wall. It needs to be a grand production of a game. And if the game's not a real game and there's no trophy, then, oh, and the thing is like I have the most fun underneath the bridge kicking the ball off the wall, and I can't tell you how much enjoyment that would bring, just knocking the ball off the wall, learning how it comes back to you, striking it different ways. And um, when I went to Europe for the first time, I was very blessed to go on this trip. We trained in Denmark at the national team training facility for 1 week, and it really opened my eyes to just how different it is in the rest of the world. You go from being nobody and nobody caring about what you do in your sport to everybody's interested, everybody's talking about it, everybody wants to know, who you are, who are these players. And um, it's something that sadly enough we're still not even close to that here, in my opinion. Just in my opinion, we're not even close to that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that's your opinion. I think it's many fans' opinions, right? In terms of, especially if you've been around the game for a while, you understand that where we are here in this country today in 2023 is where many countries were a decade ago, right? Or even further back, right? We're so separated from where the rest of the world kind of treats this game and how they bring it to the next generation of fans. From a lineage perspective, there's so many different ways to look at it. But I like what you mentioned there, though. In terms of the things that you were doing, right? That I imagine put you on a path to pro, right? Finding enjoyment in simply training, getting as many touches on the ball as possible. Which, when I talk to players today, the fact that there are still players today that feel competitive players that play for club, and still feel like all I need are the 2 to 3 training sessions that I get with my team every week. And I'm probably on this path because that's kind of what they've been sold by
Yeah.
the clubs and the coaches that, hey, I'm the expert. Come train with me a few times a week and you're going to get there. When in reality, I think probably better than most that the amount of work required to get to where you want to go far exceeds that, right? So maybe you can help us debunk that myth a little bit on when it comes to transitioning from in your early days from just being someone who is massively passionate about the game and actually pretty good at it because you played so often to then thinking, okay, I can make a career out of this.
Yeah.
How much did you have to double down on the work you were putting in, on the competition you were facing? Like, give us a peek behind the curtain there.
Okay. Yeah. So it probably goes really back to when I was young as a club player, first started club. I started getting paid then by a parent. So one parent would pay me $5 every single goal that I scored, as long as I wouldn't leave the club. I had no idea. I'm not going to lie to you, no idea. Like I said, we weren't wealthy at all growing up, and so my parents didn't even go to a lot of the games. Like if we had a tournament to go to, I would stay with the coach and his kid in the hotel, and So for me, when I have another parent giving me money and I'm buying candy bars and all this stuff, I'm thinking, man, this is pretty great. This is pretty great. And people would tell my parents, "Oh man, he's going to be a pro. He's going to be a pro. This kid's really good." And when I look at it now, looking at all the kids I see, and you hear that all the time, "Oh, your kid's so good. This kid's so good. Man, this kid's amazing." And I see some amazing kids as well. But knowing that most don't make it, that it's like 1%, if that, that will make it actually pro, um, made me think a lot about how can I get to them about what they need to do. Because so for me, like you said, club soccer or academy soccer, whatever you want to call it, it's just a place where you apply your trade. Um, I played at San Diego Surf down in San Diego back when it was a real club, in my opinion. They weren't franchises all over the place, just selling to make money, selling out. There was only that club. That was it. There weren't surfs all
Hmm.
the whole U.S. And we were a decent side. We were always making finals of stuff, and I only would train down there maybe once a week, twice a week at most, hour and a half of the training sessions. But I would play in the street 2 3 hours, play under the bridge hour 2 hours, play my lunch break at school. Um, I would sometimes set my alarm early in the morning, 2 a.m., go play out in the street. I loved playing in the street under the orange lights, knocking the ball off the curb. I just couldn't get enough. When I first went to Europe, and I realized even there, the coach said, "Man, you have something. What are you wanting to do with your career? What are you wanting to do?" And I said, I want to be a pro. This is what I want to do for my life. And just said that you need to love what you're doing and keep doing it. Um, but the amount of hours I would say that I touched a soccer ball in any given day would be anywhere from 4 to 5 to 6 hours a day, at some level of touching it. It's not constantly doing everything like full sprint and fast as you can. Sometimes it's just sitting down and juggling the ball. Sometimes it's just knocking it off the wall. Sometimes it's watching TV with the ball at your feet. Um, but when I know that I didn't even make it to the highest level, you know, and I did all that work, these kids that don't do much, they've got no chance. They just don't. And like you said, the clubs will tell them, just stick with us, just be with us, and we'll get you there. Well, it's because they just want your money, and they don't even want you training with anybody else. If I've been at clubs where if they see our kid over at another club doing training midweek or at a camp, they tell us that tell him he can't be over there, otherwise he's not starting on the weekend, because they don't want to lose, you know. And a lot of parents have no idea this is going on. I mean, I have a ton of friends that are in the club soccer business. I don't want to say in the coaching, but in the business side of it, and
Sure.
they know exactly what it is. We talk about it all the time. Talk about all the things they have to do differently in the U.S. that they would never do in Europe. They would never do in South America. Um, and the number one thing I think that you know helped me was somebody told me that it was my responsibility. It wasn't their responsibility as a coach. That it was up to me. And I always got that as well from my stepdad. Would just be like, "Are you doing enough? How do you know you're doing enough? Why aren't you training right now?" He was a top athlete himself, and not soccer. No, my family knew soccer, but it was always that. But always, are you doing enough? Are you doing enough? Are you doing enough? I mean, I think the thing is you can only do that if you love it. You can't do it if your parents are making you do it, or I see all these kids doing private training sessions, and it's just
Yep.
I think, like, man, if you have to be out there with a private trainer, you're never going to be any good. You know, if you've got to be out there paying somebody to play with you, like, there's a wall right there. The goal is still there. There's cones if you want cones. There's trees. There's all this stuff. If you're not doing that on your own and you need to be with a private trainer in order to get motivated to go do this, I would destroy you as a player. I would. I mean, you have no chance against me because you're going to just give up once it gets hard. You know, have a crazy passion for it and be a little nuts, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? What's crazy about that is there was a time in my life where I entertained the coaching route because I played academy ball. I had 2 years of college, and before I got hurt, I went the business route. But like I've talked to more than a few parents, and it's crazy how often I get the argument from parents that one, they want their kid to be a pro. They feel like their kid can go pro. But then two, oh, they need to be kids. There needs to be, balance and, they can't be training all the time. And, but they're still going to go pro. Right. And I'm thinking in my head, I even as recently as a couple weeks ago, there were rumors of like Martin Odegaard for Arsenal, who apparently his trainer released his schedule when he was a kid, and he was training up to 24 hours a week, 24 to 30 hours a week. And you think to yourself, as a player, if you're not even getting remotely close to that, right? If you're hitting 24 hours every couple weeks, maybe, or hell, even in a month, but you're still making that argument that, like, well, I'm a kid, it's going to be okay, I have time, the passion will find me, right? I kind of think back to what you just said right there. If if I'm the opposing player, right? I hope I get to play against you. I hope that your perfect little environment that you need to make sure that you have all the motivation in the world to go out there and practice and hone your craft, that I hope that it's all disrupted and I get a chance to play against you, because at the end of the day, I know that I'll win. I know I want it more than you do. um, Going back to that one specific point where parents feel like sometimes kids are pushed too quickly into that path to pro, right?
Yep.
And maybe they don't have to be pushed if they're really going to be on that path, right? Like you mentioned yourself, you kind of just want to be out there if that's what you want to do for a living.
Yep.
But what would you say to those parents, I guess? And you've coached, youth yourself. You've seen plenty of youth players. When if you've ever heard that, is there a response you would give as someone who's already gone down that path to pro himself?
In regards to how much time they need to train, sorry.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
well, I would think I would think that at a younger age, I think kids need a lot more freedom. It's everything I learned from top coaches, way better than me, top players, World Cup players. Um, is that young players need a lot of freedom and not specialized in terms of specializing in one sport right away, or but being overcoached right away, told to. I mean, still the best players in the world and the most professionals in the world, I believe, come out of Sao Paulo, and they come out of the streets pretty much. And I think a lot of places all over the world try to create that, and we try to do it with some of the leagues we have that are very player centered, and we want them playing all the time, but we don't want it really structured, if that makes sense. Don't want it to be. We don't want to take away who they are as a player, and we want to see what they can do as a player, and not only for 5 minutes. We want to see what they can do as a player over 6 months if they have a little bit of freedom, um, and not be told no all the time. And I think in order to get that through to the parents is have to be able to make sure the parents very, very much engaged and involved. And that doesn't mean overbearing, but that they're there to support their child and make sure that they get them out to the park to play with friends, make sure that they're watching the game on TV, making sure that they're getting them to play in rec leagues, plus maybe club leagues, plus maybe indoor leagues, you know um, getting them to where they can play as much as they want to without burning them out. Like, as long as the kid's desiring it, I would say get them involved as much as possible, but to do it in a really unstructured way. Meaning, like, pick up games in the park. There's nothing wrong with that. The best players come from the street. But here in America, it's looked at, oh, that's not, he's never going to be a pro unless he's got his full training gear and his coach is there and cones are perfect and all this stuff. No, there's like zero players that come from that environment to be. They all come from starting with family, starting in the backyard, starting in the street with friends. That's where, a majority of the top players come from. And the parent needs to be creating that constantly. And that's why we struggle here in this country, because our parents don't like soccer, so they only do it the twice a week with their kids. They drop them off, and they only like watching their kid. They don't get enjoyment watching the other kids. They're not like soccer people where they just, if there's a game going on in the park, they want to see it. And they want to be.
Yep.
They only have a love for their kid and just watching them. Um, and I think that's where there's a problem with the time, um, because e- even every parent doesn't want to watch their kid like 8 hours a day just playing soccer. you know so pushing them or getting supporting them, I wouldn't say it's pushing, but supporting them to be able to play all the time. I think it's really hard for parents,
Yeah.
uh, um, because it's not natural to them, I think.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think it's that last point you mentioned specifically, right? Most parents in this country really enjoy their child, and all of the screaming you hear from the sidelines is directed almost solely to their children, despite the context situationally on the field. They like you can tell sometimes, at least when I hear it, that they're not even understanding of what the situation is, what whether the players in a 1v2 or they have to use their skills to get out of a certain situation on the pitch. And they're just screaming what they think their kid needs to be doing, regardless of what's happening around them. And you can tell automatically that they're only watching their kid and the ball. But you mentioned something right there that I really want to kind of, at least from the youth soccer and parent perspective of this show, close out on. I think we all saw months ago the Reina Berhalter situation unfold.
Yeah.
And I think it was a perfect example, almost symbolically, of what U.S. youth soccer is in comparison to the rest of the world. Um, do you honestly think we ever get to a point in this country where we move past that this broken system and model that we have and this culture that's been developed as a result of all of it?
I think if all the people change, not meaning like they change how they do things, meaning you get new people in there. I think if you get new people in there, then change will happen. But in my experience on boards and involved in, um, not leagues but federations and stuff like that, is people, whether it's money or whether it's power, they like it and they don't want to give it up. And if that's their opinion of how U.S. soccer should operate, well, that's not going to change. That helps keep them in control. Um, and so I think unless there's a system that comes up alongside of it, parallel, um, I really don't see anything anything changing. I think it's going to stay very very much the same, and it'll be a lot of talk of change and this, that, and the other. But I mean, I'm deeply involved in the game, and I don't feel any change any different. I mean, I don't think there's any caring about the game in this country, and I mean, I hold a USB license as a coach, and I've just been made aware that when I took it, that it was a lifetime license, and now I'm just being made aware. I think I have to pay $500 a year now to renew it, or every couple years, to renew it, and that to me is just the scam of what is going on in this. You know, you're going to push people away from me because I'm not going to redo it. You know,
Yeah.
and that one that just is like, this is a joke. You know.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. I think I didn't even know that you had to. I think at a certain stage, right? You're supposed to just be able to. Those are lifetime licenses when you get certainly high up. It's not like a D license, right? Where that the curriculum could change every year, and you need to actually go back and get that renewed. Yeah, that's the short sightedness of the federation in terms of going after revenue, and not even the federation. I would even say go as far as saying the league itself, right? We see Major League Soccer take the Apple TV deal because of the $2 billion that are presented up front, as opposed to the long term revenue opportunities that can scale between 10 to 20 years. The commissioner wants the payout now, and that I understand that to an extent, but I don't think that they realize the consequences of those decisions and how the markets were impacted. We could talk about that another day, but I just think that it's almost like, again, just a perfect example of how short-sighted U.S. soccer, whether it's at the youth level or the professional level, has grown over time. It's become this short-term business model that, at the end of the day, the only ones who really end up losing are the players' development, right?
Yeah.
And for that reason, I've had a bunch of people on this show. I always ask this question. I always ask a variation of what will it take for the U.S. to grow out of this cycle that it's in, where I think we're the only country in CONCACAF that has never had a truly world-class player come through the ranks. And I don't know if we ever really will because of how our development model is molded. But I'd like to ask you that now, Brandon. I mean, from your perspective, if there was kind of just this one thing, right? Whether it's a reversal of a decision that's already been implemented, or maybe it's time. Who knows? Maybe it just takes more of migration of the football that exists overseas to make its way over to America. I don't know, but is there anything that this country can do to position soccer over time as a sport that we can consider we can almost consider to be one of our dominant sports, right? It can become a top 2, a top 3 sport.
Yeah, for sure. There's many ways, but people have to want to do it. France is a great example. Belgium's a great example of changing their systems to develop top players. There's a lot of talk right now down here locally in San Diego because MLS now coming into San Diego. What does that mean
Yeah.
for? And I mean, I have friends at Loyal, and don't want to say anything bad, but like, how would they feel like if another USL team came in? Would they allow that? I mean, there's stuff that's like hypocritical with a lot of stuff that goes on with U.S. closed systems. But $500 million. Now, if you really wanted to change things, if you really wanted to, just think in Southern California. I think we have 30-40 million people in Southern California. $500 million could probably be build 30 to 40 like you know fields with maybe 1,000 bleachers, locker rooms, 30 to 40, especially depending on where you pick the land out. And then you can have 30 to 40, maybe third division teams. And that's going to foster so much more than spending $500 million on a team that's going to be half American citizens to begin with and not there to develop players. And it's just a choice. That's a choice made. Now that business person doesn't have to do that. Obviously, you're going to want an American that wants to grow the game, that has that income and says, "Listen, I'm going to donate all this, and we're going to have this many fields, but you have to have like some sort of professional level, like first team." So there has to be a process that you follow. If you want to use this facility and you want to have your club here, your youth have to follow a certain process, and you don't want it to be too, controlled. But that hey, you're trying to get these young players that are local to fall in love with the game and get them into your first team and play. I think we would develop a lot of players that way,
Yeah.
especially if you did them right to where fans wanted to come out. You had beer for sale, food for sale, nice little stands, nice field, um, enjoyable environment. Well, these kids would come out to that. They'd want to play there eventually. They'd want to be there. And then now you have 40 teams or so in Southern California that can play in, a 9-month league year round on great little facilities. And instead of what we have now, which isn't much, people using high school stadiums, fields where they can find them, don't have that culture that they can build where like a youth player can come to their local stadium and see history of, photographs up of former players, and they can, see cups in there that they won, a proper clubhouse that a kid can really aspire to. Then that's what gets that kid to go back, train in their yard, train in the street, be passionate. And once you have millions of kids doing that, well, you develop top players. I mean, you will, because you'll eventually have one that's so athletic, that also has football intelligence because he's out there seeing it all the time. He's watching it on TV. He's got access to it now at his fingertips on his phone. And then we would develop a top player. But right now, all the top potential players, majority of them, they're not even getting an opportunity in this country. because it's
Yeah.
too expensive to play.
Do you think we solve any of these issues with an open ecosystem?
Oh yeah, right away. I think you do right away. And people don't want to hear it, or they don't want to see it. And I get it. As an owner, if promotion relegation opened up, it would be the hardest thing for me. It'd be extremely hard, because say we're right now considered the fourth division, and now it's great. Okay, we're only 3 levels away from being in MLS, or the top division, whatever they want to call it. Well, what do you think everybody else is going to do that's got money? You know, well, I'm gonna have to invest so much more money to keep my top players around, and keep,
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm gonna have to spend so much more. The owners don't win in this situation unless it's prize money, TV rights money, and soccer knows there's no TV rights money really. There's no prize money really, because it's not that important. And you would get billionaires coming in, boom, spending money, and these other owners now that spend nothing on their players, nothing on their staff. All they spend their money is on a nice stadium, and they would be struggling. They're going to have to spend money now. Players, staff would be the massive beneficiaries. So your players, number one, that's it. You're going to develop better players. You need to, or you got to buy better players. That's going to bring better players into the league, better players for American players to play around, and it would instantly make it, you know, about having to be better in order to be successful, not having to pay more just to be successful. You've got to be better, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. As an owner, then, I mean, considering all of the obstacles you just laid out, I mean, why? I think I've seen you guys on Twitter be big proponents for the most part of pro relegation, an open ecosystem to an extent. To an extent, I think I've seen a number of actually people, personnel in U.S. soccer who've proposed like hybrid models. Right? Maybe they start with the bottom pyramid being open and leave the top end of MLS closed until there's a model that's proven. Who knows? And we had a couple folks on this show who've introduced their own ideas, but is
Yeah.
there a way to make this mutually beneficial for players and owners alike?
No, no, nothing's ever mutual, beneficial. I mean, someone's going to lose. That's why they don't want to do it, because they know it's a guarantee now that people are going to lose. And, but to me, athlete, I mean, I can't even imagine it if when I was a pro, if the ref said, "Hey, FYI, the other team's going to win today. You have fun, do your best, but the other team's going to win today." You know, and or vice versa. Hey, even if you guys lose, you guys are winning today. You're going to win. It makes zero sense. That's not competition. And the fact of, that's really embarrassing, I think, to the US game in general, is that if you have MLS clubs that are scared of Temecula Football Club or other fourth division teams, or even lower than that, tweeting stuff about having an open system, and they're wanting to shut that down, like, no, that's silly. You're scared to play Temecula Football Club. Like, I mean, it just blows my mind. But it's not that they're scared to play Temecula Football Club. They're scared a billionaire will come in, build a stadium, invest more money than they're investing, and beat them. That's what the worry is. It's no different than the Super League in Europe. They didn't want to deal with new owners coming in, spending money and beating them. They just wanted be in the league, make their money, not have to worry, protect their stars, and that's I don't know. That's just that when it comes to being competitive, really, that's really unfortunate in my opinion, because that's why we don't have it's why we don't have interest in our leagues, and it sucks. Even our league, it's hard to
Yeah.
get interest, because, like, if we could move up, we're doing good. We're in first place in our league, tied for first. If we could move up to the third division professional, if we win, I mean, the interest would be massive, in our community. And but since we can't, we have to kind of just tell the story of our kids and our team, the local stars, come and support. We're trying to grow this, that, and the other, instead of it just being natural. That's hard.
It is. It's very difficult, but I think that it's still very early, right? The earliest of days. I mean, NISA was started what 3, 4 years ago, I think. Yeah, 2019, something along those lines, I want to say.
Or
So
before the pandemic, I think. Yeah.
yeah, and to talk about a time to launch, right? I mean, there's all those obstacles that this very young league has had to overcome that others just haven't, or they overcame them much later in the life cycle, which therefore means they were better rooted and in a better position to overcome those obstacles.
Yeah.
And so I think that the fact that NISA is still is one still around, and two has clubs that are thriving, at other levels. You hear about certain stadiums filling up 5K fans, 8K fans. You in California alone, best, right? There are already teams who get a pretty good showing, and so I think it's probably a great transition to this part of the show as we get closer to wrapping up here. There are plenty of diehard American soccer fans in this country, but that only know MLS. There's so many of them, right? They're MLS diehards. They don't really even follow the USL Championship or any of the leagues below them. What if you could just kind of walk us through for a few minutes, why should those fans be tuning into NISA? Why should they be supporting the leagues below the top division?
I mean, that's a good question, but I think the reason they don't is because the clubs aren't connected.
Mm-hmm.
So we get a lot of supporters that come into the office, and we everybody likes to follow the Premier League and EFL and even non-league football. But the reason why we talk about all the different teams is because they're all being affected right now. Some are getting promoted, some are getting relegated. Now, MLS fans would be definitely talking about USL, NISA, whoever else is around, if teams were moving up and teams were moving down, because now you're all connected. So results that happen at the other levels can directly affect you, or you're at least interested. I get it a lot. Like people say, "Oh, well, you're passionate about the game. You need to be supporting the highest level in our country." And they're like, "Why do you not support it? Why do you not watch it? Why are you not interested?" And I'll just tell them because we're not connected at all. At any level, we're not connected outside of U.S. Open Cup. That's the only time that all of U.S. soccer is connected. And I think the new graphics that were put out where U.S. Open Cup year over year is gaining traction and
Mm-hmm.
growing is just a sign the fact that, well, yeah, once you bring the whole country together, well, you're gonna have more interest. Once Temecula can play LA Galaxy, they go far enough. Well, of course, all of Temecula is going to be interested in what's going on with Galaxy during that game, and Galaxy is going to be interested in who is this Temecula. You've connected the people, and the game is about the people. It's not about, hey, I own this territory, and I don't want you around. I just want money for my club, and that's all I want. Um, people don't like, and that shows in the numbers. I mean, it shows in the numbers, and I get it. Back in the '90s, early '90s, um, MLS struggled, and people kept it alive. I get that 100%. People weren't going to games. People weren't interested in the game. They had to do a lot to keep the league going. I 100% get that. And I don't think anybody, wants other, nobody wants, clubs to fail. I think they want leagues to fail, but they want the clubs around. And they want all the clubs together. I mean, I can only imagine how popular this game would be if if it got away from control and money and franchises, and it went to the people, because the people would go crazy in this country for promotion relegation, and I think that would be in all sports. To be honest with you, I think if they did it in American football, I think if they did it in American basketball, and they did it in baseball, I would have interest. Only those final games that meant something, I would be I would be interested in those stories. And because I understand what it means to the fans, and I understand what it means to the ownership groups and the players to move up, and that's so American. The underdog story is so American, and we go away from it in this country, and blows blows my mind.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a most American thing in the world is the underdog story, and then coming from nothing and being successful. And there's so many good players and so many good owners and so many good teams. at all levels, and they don't get a shot, and it's unfortunate.
It's more than unfortunate. And look what the end result is, right? Even if you're the top, the upper echelon of the soccer pyramid here in the US, what does that mean if there are no real consequences for the results that you plug in a year and a year out, right? You get legacy clubs like I live in the Dallas market, like FC Dallas, or even worse, because Dallas is still in a pretty decent spot. We pump out a lot of good youth talent, and the business model works, and so for that reason, they kind of keep things pretty even keel and mainstay year over year. But look at the Rapids, right? I've been to Denver, right, during the season, and I can't tell you when I walk down some of the streets in downtown, right? You'll even off season, you'll see Broncos jerseys. If it's the middle of hockey, NHL playoffs, you'll see Avs jerseys. You don't really see Rapids. You don't really see a lot of there. And Commerce City, I mean, I just again, it kind of almost pains my heart a little bit but there because there is nothing really strong for the fans to latch onto. When I remember watching at the end of the Prem season last year, Everton's fans storming the field after they avoided relegation as if they had won the Premier League. And
Yeah.
thinking to myself, how is it not possible to at least somehow, and I get owners are probably the first people you think of when trying to build something like this out, but how are we not able to work towards a model that allows the fans to win in this big of a manner when other leagues around the world are doing it? And and you could argue in many cases they're very prosperous in the way that they're doing it. Again, I don't want to beat
Oh,
this point up too much here, but I mean, from your perspective, before we move on from this point, is there any model as an owner that you see, maybe because of your insights and how long you've been around this game, is there any model that you think could work? Maybe it's not pro relegation outright the way it's been modeled in other leagues, other countries, but is there a model that would work for this weird pyramid that we've built out over time?
no, I think that's the thing. That there is a model that works, and it's the Premier League and the EFL and how they do the leagues below. It's the most popular league, especially here in the U.S. And so that does work. People know it. They're getting to know it better now with Wrexham and other documentaries that are being done. So, I mean, I think the only hard thing with the U.S. is England's very small. So travel, stuff of that sort, is completely different. It's a completely different world, and you can't really create that here in the U.S. because people that are playing in LA, and they're coming from New York aren't going to have 7,000 fans making that trip unless it's just once a year, kind of like a Champions League style, if that makes sense. And when you don't have that, you can't really build rivalries. You can't really build excitement if you can only see your team half the time. Where if they split up the U.S., and there was a good graphic out there that showed kind of like the U.S. split into four regions as like first divisions, and then they would play a Champions League style. So it's almost like different countries,
Hmm.
And I would think that would be the best bet. You cut down on travel, which is very difficult on the players, the staff, and everything. But then the fans, if they can go to a majority of their team's games, home or away, you're you bring in more money. Away fans coming into the community. You're telling more stories. The fans love stories. They love going to away games, having a pint and then going to the game and yelling and, meeting the people that they met in the community. You have more communities filled up in hotels. And, obviously you're going to get your trouble that comes along with anything like that, which is natural all over the world. But you're going to have a lot more really good stories that come out of it. And I, I think if they did that and they committed to that, I think you'd have a massive interest from in right away. And people can say, "Oh, well, there's not much interest, this, that, and the other." Well, you put an MLS franchise somewhere, and all of a sudden there's 30,000 fans. How can you say there's no interest in that if you're already testing markets, knowing there's a lot of people that love the game, um, and uh, that's the route I would go. Even though we would be affected by it, maybe good, maybe bad. I'm not a very wealthy owner, and so we rely on a lot of volunteers, and our players give everything they can. on the pitch and receive not much back from us because we don't have it. And an owner could come into Temecula area, pop up a team, spend 500, 600,000 a year, and we would have to fight really hard to compete with them. But I would welcome that more than the state we're in with a closed system and nobody connected.
I highly respect that. I respect the hell out of that, man. I think that's almost the American way, right? Like competition and it's capitalism. It's all part of who we are, what we do. But the minute you close that off, so that a select few at the very top can benefit, and the rest of us have to kind of fight for scraps. I don't know. It just kind of goes against everything mentally, physically. I mean, just from almost any perspective. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. I'm a big proponent of pro rel. And I know we're kind of getting close to time here. I have two questions left. And I think one is more of an opinion probably than that I'm looking from you as opposed to just a direct question. You mentioned the U.S. Open Cup earlier.
Yep.
I love the U.S. Open Cup. I think it's purely the most football, and I mean global football, the beauty of it. It is the most football-like competition that we've ever had.
Yep.
And yet to this day, not only does the league not really, I mean MLS, right, really respect it that much. I mean, sometimes you can't even watch the games because they're so disjointed in how the broadcasts work. But
Yeah.
fans themselves don't treat it with enough respect. And it honestly gets on my nerves a little bit because at the end of the day, it's like, how can you be a proponent of this game growing in this country or adopting models that other leagues and other countries are making work, but
Yeah.
yet we're kind of taking a dump on the one cup and the one tournament that truly embraces the ecosystem that we're all massive fans of. So for those who don't tune in or maybe downplay US Open Cup a little bit, is there anything that you could tell to some of those fans regarding how great this tournament is?
Yeah, I mean, like we discussed about, the underdog story and everything it means to be like an American, be self-made, come here, work hard, get what you want. It's all in a tournament like that where everybody's included for the most part. But I think it's difficult for MLS because they're not a league yet that people respect even globally, and people can say, oh, they're respected, but they're not respected here in the U.S. either, as everybody can see. Um, and so for them, I think it's got to be very hard. If I'm an MLS owner and I'm in U.S. Open Cup, I'm thinking, crap, man, yeah, we could lose. And this is going to be really bad for us. I don't want to lose. And now I have to think, what to tell my staff in terms of, well, if we put out a B team against these guys and lose, then we have an excuse. But if we play our first team and we lose to a USL team or, a NISA team, well, I'm not going to have too many excuses and I'm not going to have too many reasons for these people to come back to the stadium the next weekend if we're losing to this lower league team. And where in Europe, of course they don't want to lose, but the fans are educated and the fans are different. They love their team. If you're Man City and you lose to say like a Blackpool in the FA Cup, people aren't going to stop supporting Man City. They're not going to be like, I'll never support the club again. The fans for Man City are probably going to be fair play to Blackpool. Well done. You know what I mean? And it'll be one of the best days in Blackpool's life, or say it's even like a non-league team.
Yep.
And that's one of the major differences is that, since there is this hardcore support and passion for the clubs in our country, and people can just, be fan of another club tomorrow just because they moved into their area. Loyal. I mean, that's a great topic that could have like a really good section. Like, if I'm loyal, I shouldn't be worried that all my fans are going to leave and go support MLS. Otherwise, they were never fans. All they were customers.
Yep.
They were just customers. They were never a fan. They were never a supporter of this club. All they were coming out for the weekend, having a beer, having some food, watching a game, then going home. And that's really sad. If that's the fact that they lose all their people and you start seeing them migrate over to MLS, well, they would do the same thing to the MLS team if somebody else came in with a better show. And that's one thing we need to get away from. And one thing fans need to understand is, stick by your team, thick and thin, support them, you know, I, buy their stuff, be around, help them grow, help tell the story. like the rest of the world. Cry when things go bad, and then celebrate when it's great. I mean, it's the biggest thing missed. Like you said, like if you had promotion relegation in this country, it's why Everton was so excited when they stayed up. You imagine every single win you have or every draw you have helps you stay up that season. Helps.
Mhm.
So you're so excited when you win. It's not just like, oh, another game. Oh, another game we lost. Oh, unfortunate. Next year we'll try next year.
Yep.
Uh, Everything's very serious and important, and the conversations become that way. Um, so I think knowing U.S. Open Cup is our only thing close to that. I mean, it's Sacramento winning last year would have been really great. I think for this country in terms of football. It's unfortunate they didn't. But when you look at the run they had and the run other teams have done, you realize the potential that these clubs aren't far off. They're only one or two players away, maybe a little bit more money,
Yep.
and standards very close, and it's worth watching. And they should understand that and get out there and support it.
Yeah, 100%. And equally, to kind of wrap this up, it's a perfect segue. I mean, I think at the same time, Nisa has more than a few standout players and teams that, we just had Noah Kavanaugh from Flower City Union on the show not too long ago, a few weeks back. I mean, I think the Nisa, as young of a league as it is, it's producing talent. And I think that, fans, especially if you want to see the game grow here, and I can't say that adamantly enough, if you're a big proponent of the game growing here, not just the Premier League being more popular than it is now, but like legitimately there being a culture around this game, I think you have to look at the grassroots level of this game professionally and start to really show some love, right? Get into your community, meet people. And I'm sure it's why you started Temecula FC to begin with, right? Getting back to your roots. So if people haven't heard Temecula FC, haven't heard of Nisa, is there a quick, kind of elevator pitch you would give them to start really showing some love?
Yeah, I would say, like, it's great if you're a Temecula FC supporter. All over, we have supporters all over the world, this, that, and the other. But my suggestion for sure would be find your local team, go out to a game, whatever level they're at. If they're local Sunday League, UPSL, NISA, USL, whatever it is, your local teams. Maybe have two or three, maybe close to, if you're lucky. Go to each game, find one that you identify with, and ask them how you can help, because everybody needs it. Just go and ask them, how can I be involved, how can I help? Oh, well, maybe it's with the supporters group, maybe it's volunteer on game day. Maybe it's they're a great marketer, or they're great at something and the club needs that. But you would be surprised what even 10 men can do on the sideline to support their team with drums or yelling or screaming or flares, or whatever it is. Cowbells. We got David at our club with the cowbell. The players love him. But you would be surprised what even just 10 people can do in terms of changing a community. And get out there, grab some friends, and you're gonna have a great time.
I love that. I love that, man. And look, guys, Nisa's growing. All right. And for anybody who's stuck around to the end of the show, I really appreciate you. Go check out Temecula FC. Go check out Nisa. Go support, like Brandon just said, go support your local club. I think it's always great, of course, for you to have, the higher overarching world beater of a club that, the Real Madrids, the Barcelonas, the Arsenals, the Manchester Uniteds, those are all great, right? That's like a great starting point for so many casual fans of this country. But if you really want to dig in, and get a little deeper than just the rah on weekends. Dig in, meet some folks at your club, at your local club. You'd be surprised how much you actually have in common. I think it's the beauty of it too. When I started watching North Texas SC, and because they play at Choctaw Stadium where the Texas Rangers baseball team plays. That's kind of how I discovered it. I started going to games. The seats were really great priced. I could be on the field, and it's an experience that I could never get at an FC Dallas game. I think it's just I could never have that level of, I don't know, closeness, I guess, with the players and with the staff. And so it's a different kind of special. I highly recommend anybody who watched this episode today to go check out your local club and just show support. It's the only way we're really going to have this country truly embrace it, not just for this generation, but for the next generation of fans as well. So, Brandon, before I let you go, this was honestly a great conversation today. I really appreciate it. Any final shout outs before we get to the outro here?
No, just appreciate everything you're doing, growing the game. We need more people like that, and it's very much appreciated. Okay.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. And guys, we appreciate you. So you got to the end of the show. If you haven't done so already, please like the video down below, subscribe to the channel. Every bit of free support really does go a long way, much longer than you know. And as Brandon already said, guys, support the local game. We need this game to grow. The World Cup's coming in 2026. How amazing would it be if there was already a culture here that fans from all over the world could really appreciate it? I'm so excited for that. And again, I'm so excited that Brandon Jantz of Temecula FC was here with us today for Box to Box episode 52. All right, for everybody here at GOLZtv and Box to Box, my name is Jose Tellez. That's Brandon Jantz. We'll see you guys next time.